Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais with another episode of the Yakking Show. And this is the Harmony, Your Path to Wholeness channel. And we lead you along that path to wholeness by bringing you interesting and experienced and expert guests. And today will be no exception. Looking forward to talking to this guest today. But first, let's introduce co host Kathleen Beauvais. Hi, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you so much. And thank you also very much for tuning into our show. We so appreciate having you. And as Peter mentioned, we do have another special guest with us today. We're so excited to welcome Terry Tucker to the show. Hello, Terry. How are you?
Peter, Kathleen, I am great. I'm looking forward to talking with you today.
As always, good.
So Terry is a sought after speaker who believes in the power of a story to motivate, inspire, and help others lead their uncommon and extraordinary lives. By combining his 12-year cancer journey with his diverse business, athletic coaching, and hostage negotiating expertise, he delivers compelling yet relatable presentations for conferences, online events, panels, meetings, and seminars. So, Terry, you've written a book entitled Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Can you touch on some of these principles and explain how people have the power to lead an extraordinary life?
Sure. So, sustainable excellence, I guess I got to kind of tell you how it came about, if you don't
Yeah,
mind,
absolutely.
before we jump on the principles. So, it was really born out of two conversations I had. Never wanted to write a book, never expected to write a book. There's kind of an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So, God never told me to write a book or anything like that. But I think what God did was put a bunch of people in my path that said, you should write this book. So the book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached when I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, who had moved to the area in Colorado with her fiance, where my wife and I live. And the four of us had dinner one night. And I remember after dinner saying to her that I was really excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, "Well, coach, what do you think my purpose is?" I said, "I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and then living that reason." So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media and he asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help, sort of the cliches that we all
Hmm.
know. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I took some time, wrote some notes, eventually had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, well, I got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So I had my leg amputated in 2020 as a result of my cancer journey. And while I was healing all those months, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories. And they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's really kind of how the book came to be.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hmm.
So, on your website, and it comes out of your book, I think, or the work you did for your book, you talk about three important values, and you list character, courage, and humility. And I agree with you 100% that they're important. But what's your perspective? You please tell our audience why you believe they're important.
Yeah, I think values is something that we don't talk a lot about, and
Hmm.
I think back to my first two jobs out of college were in the marketing department of Wendy's International, the
Yeah.
hamburger chain, in their marketing department, and then I was a hospital administrator, and I remember in between that time I interviewed for a job with a packaging company, and I was interviewing with the senior vice president of marketing. And we spent 90 minutes, an hour and a half, talking about my life from basically the time I was born until the time I graduated from high school. And at the end of the interview, I said to him, I said, "Look, I got to ask you, you didn't ask me one question about marketing, one question about business, one question about, philosophy or how I would work with the team." I said, "This has been one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had. I've got to ask you why you had this type of interview. He said, well, I have plenty of people around me that'll tell me whether you're a good fit for the team. Incidentally, I did not get the job. So obviously I was not a good fit for the team. But he said, I want to hire people of good character, of who have values. And he said, I believe values, character are developed in the first 20 years of your life.
Mhm.
So that's why I asked you about your childhood, your basketball career, your college experience. He said, because I believe character is caught, not taught. You're not going to read a book and say, all right, I've got great character. You're going to look at somebody and say, boy, I really like the way she handled that situation, or I don't think he handled that situation very well. So I think values are incredibly important. And I could have listed a whole bunch of other values, but it just took me up to a point where what is unshakable, what is unmovable, what is the foundation of my life. And I just felt character, courage, and humility were things that really resonated with me.
Yeah, very
So-
good.
So getting back to your student that had dinner with you that one time, and she asked you about living what do you think my purpose is? And that's an excellent question, because there's so many people out there that are confused about why they're put here. Why are we on this planet anyways? They have trouble figuring out what that purpose is in life. So how would you help someone draw that out of them? Because somewhere within themselves, they have the answer. They just maybe on a subconscious level, but not on a conscious level. So they just it's lost, it's buried within them. So how do you help to draw that out?
Yeah, I think back to the quote, and I'm going to paraphrase because I'll mess it up if I try to do it word for word, from Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, was a Holocaust survivor during World War II, and
Right.
talked about the importance of having a purpose in life, that there's nobody's here in the abstract, that we're just kind of wandering around. Everybody has a purpose, and you have almost a fundamental right isn't the word I'm looking for. You have you're supposed to live that purpose. You're not supposed to kind of muddle through it. And I remember, we talk about purpose in the singular, like it's one thing, like there's supposed to be
True.
one thing that we're supposed to do.
Right.
And I look at it more in the plural, at least for my life. When I was young, I was a college basketball player, I was a high school basketball player. I really felt that was my purpose. I ate, drank, and slept basketball. And then as I got into adulthood, I think my purpose changed again. And I wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps of being in law enforcement. And now, in all honesty, as I'm probably coming to the end of my life, I think my purpose has changed again, to put as much goodness, positivity, motivation, and love back into the world. So I would caution people to say, there's only one thing that you're supposed to do. I think you could be doing a lot of things in your life. So how do you find that? You find things, you figure out your gifts and talents. Well, what are you good at? And then try stuff with the understanding that nothing is perfect in life. There's no perfect human being. There's no perfect marriage. There's no perfect job. I mean, I love being a police officer. I hated standing 12 hours on a traffic post, in the sun with all that equipment on. But that didn't mean I didn't love being a cop. So, understand that there's nothing perfect. And if you're waiting for perfection, it's never going to happen. And I'll end with this. Jesse Itzler was the former owner of the Atlanta Hawks in the National Basketball Association here in the US. He's married to Sarah Blakely. Sarah Blakely is the founder of a woman's undergarment company called Spanx. He tells the story about when Sarah Blakely started that company, she had been a door-to-door fax salesperson. So I don't even think we use fax anymore. So that's how outdated what she did would apply now. But he said she had one prototype and $5,000 when she started Spanx. But the point of his story is, if she would have waited until everything was perfect, until everything had lined up the way she wanted, he said, I guarantee you somebody else would have come up with that idea and run with it. So figure out what your gifts and talents are, and then just jump in. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to find things that, hey, this isn't for me. Let me try something else. Don't get too hung up in, I've got to get it right out of the gate.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah, very good.
wonderful advice. Wonderful. So you mentioned also on your website that you've developed 4 truths to encourage, guide, and support people. Can you tell us about those?
Sure. So the 4 truths, I have them here on a post-it note, and so I see them multiple times during the day. So they constantly get reinforced in my mind, and they're just one sentence, and they're kind of the foundation of my soul, so to speak. And I'll give them to you. So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one is more of a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. It's as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And like I say, I look at those as kind of the bedrock of my soul. I think they're just a good place to start to try to build a quality life off of.
Mm,
Very good. Very good. So let's just pick up on that one. As long as you don't quit, you can't be defeated. But sometimes anyone, me, you, all of us need to change direction. And there's a subtle difference between bullheaded keeping on battering your head against a door that's not going to open and stepping back and saying, I need to find a way around this barrier instead of banging my head. And I know that some motivational trainers, I think, lead people too far down the don't quit route and don't reinforce that sometimes changing direction is actually not quitting. It's a sensible thing to do. How do you advise people on that difference, those two different strategies?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you a story that sort of
Sure.
illustrates that. Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine, in his book, which I cannot remember the title of right now, but he tells the story of sort of his life. He said when he graduated from college, he was working for a small town newspaper. And he said, I wasn't fulfilled. That wasn't really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an editor. And so he said, I went to work for a company that taught me a certain type of editing. And he said, as soon as I learned that, I quit that company and went to work for another company that taught me a second type of editing. And as soon as I learned that, I quit that company and I went to work for a company that taught me a third type of editing, which he says set him up to be the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. So, Peter, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you don't butt your head against the wall if you're not getting anywhere. And you do learn things. And if you can't learn anything anymore, then move on. Move
Sure.
on with your life to something else where you can learn something. As long as you're learning, you're growing. And as long as you're growing, you're not dying. Because that's really all you got. You're either growing or you're dying. There's
Oh,
really
absolutely.
nothing. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I like that story because I think it illustrates exactly what you said. You find something you want to do and you find ways to learn what you need to know so that you can do that.
Yeah. Very good. Very good.
So you've had a diverse career, my heavens, from, as I said in the intro, from hostage negotiator to various business ventures. What in particular motivated you to help people live extraordinary lives? Was there an event that triggered all of this, or is it something that was just a yearning inside of you that wanted to do this?
Well, yeah, if you look at my resume, it kind of looks like a Super Bowl went off in a room. You know, it really is kind of all over the place. But there is kind of a backstory to it. And once you understand the backstory, I think things might kind of crystallize a little bit. So I always wanted to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954 and was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a serious injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad, who was an infant at the time, always remembered the stories my grandmother told of that knock on the door of Mrs. Tucker, grab your son, come with us. Your husband's been shot. And so when I expressed an interest in following in my grandfather's footsteps, my dad was absolutely not. You're going to college, you're going to major in business, you're going to get out, get a great job, get married, have 2.4 kids, and live happily ever after. But that's the life my father wanted me to live. That's not the life I felt I was supposed to live. And so when I graduated from college, my father was actually dying of cancer. And so I had a choice. I could have said, hey, Dad, sorry, I know you're dying, but I'm going to go do my own thing and blaze my own trail. Or out of love and respect for you, I will do what you want me to do. So my first two jobs were in business because it's what my dad wanted me to do. And I sort of joke, I did what every good son did. I waited until my father passed away, and then I followed my own dreams. But that's one thing. If you would ask me, what's the most thing you're proud of in your life? I mean, other than my family, I would say it was that I never let my dream die. I never felt like, I'm a hospital administrator. I'm making decent money. Things are comfortable. But there was just the itch. There was this isn't what I'm supposed to do. This isn't what I was put on this earth to do, to go back to my former player of, what is my purpose? I felt it was to be in law enforcement. So at 37 years old, I became a rookie police officer, which by most accounts is pretty old to be getting into that line of work. But it's just a matter of understanding that was my purpose and that was the uncommon and extraordinary thing I wanted to do. Once I figured it out, it was something I wanted to share with other people as well.
And I would take a guess that at 37 you were married with with some of your 2.4 children by that stage.
Yes. Yeah, that 0.41 hadn't come along yet, but yeah, I was. And that was. I mean, you can imagine that conversation. It was like, honey, I would like to go work nights and get shot at and do all this other kind of stuff. Would you support me in that? When my wife had married me, I was a suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, hospital administrator. So could not have done that job without the support of my wife and my daughter.
Wow. Wow. And then, well, let's explore that part of your career a little bit more. Tell us about some of the experiences. Obviously, you have to be a little careful what you disclose, but how did you feel as a hostage negotiator in those really tense standoffs?
Yeah, I learned so much in that, and I'll never forget when I first started. They gave us a formula of how we communicate, not we as hostage negotiators, but as human beings, how we communicate with each other. And the formula was 7-38-55, and 7% was the words, or were the words that we use. And think how many times you say something, you're like, oh, did I say the right thing? Or, oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's only 7% of how you communicate a message to someone else. 38% is the tone of voice that you use with that message. And then 55% of how we communicate a message is our body language and our facial expressions. So think about that as negotiators. If somebody had a gun and was barricaded in a room, I was not in the room with that guy. I was a lot of times, blocks away. So I didn't have the luxury of saying something, like if I said something to you, Kathleen, and you kind of rolled your eyes, oh, what an idiot. I can't believe he said that to me. I didn't have that luxury. I didn't see that. I couldn't. So we got good at figuring things out, certainly based on what you were saying, but also what you weren't saying and how you were saying it. And the other thing I'll say about this is one of the things that's important in those situations, because a lot of times we were there having no idea what caused this. Why did this guy barricade himself or take a hostage or whatever? And so we had to figure things out. We had to get this person to trust us. I've never met this person, not alone, being in, let's face it, you're probably having the worst day of your life if you're talking to me and your house is surrounded by the police. So we would use what was called tactical empathy. I think you can take the word tactical off and just use empathy. Help me understand where you're coming from. Not necessarily agree with you, but help me to understand. Because if you feel I'm empathetic, empathy builds trust, and trust gets you to a point where you can change behavior. And the thing we would use how and what questions. We would stay away from why questions, because why questions sound accusatory. Well, Peter, why did you do that? Oh, wait a minute. Is he saying I shouldn't have done that or that was wrong? I can get to the same information by saying, well, Peter, what got us to this point? So there's a lot of nuances in what we did. It wasn't just let's go out there and talk to the guy. We had a lot of training before we were ready to do something like that.
Wow, I'm sure you did. Wow, that must be really, really interesting. Wow.
Peter?
Ah, so you've had a long experience of cancer. How did that experience help you not only overcoming the adversity you were going through, but helping other people, because that's what you do. You help other people uh, respond to challenges and overcome adversity and be resilient. What did you learn from your own journey that helped you do that?
Yeah, if I look back on my life, I was a college athlete. I was on a SWAT team. I was a very physical person. I did a lot of things that were physical. I was not real sedentary. And now all of a sudden, I don't have a left leg. I'm in a wheelchair. I have tumors in my lungs. And how do you balance those things? And when I'm asked that question, I usually say, when you can't do what you're good at anymore, you do what's important. And I really think that that is where I am in my life right now. It's about connection. One of the nurses that takes care of me in the infusion center at the hospital is a former hospice nurse. For those of your audience who don't know what hospice is, it's people who take care of people at the end of their life. And she gave me this book to read, and the book was called Imagine Heaven. And it's about people who have near-death experience and then come back. And the interesting, there are a lot of interesting things in the book. For example, if you're born completely deaf or completely blind and you have a near-death experience, you can see and you can hear during your near-death experience. So imagine how frustrating that must be.
Wow, yeah.
Back, now you're blind or you're deaf again.
Deaf again.
But the other thing that was in the book was, no matter who those people saw during their near-death experience, whether it was, Jesus or Allah or an angel or a saint or a friend or a relative, the one question that was always asked of them is, how do you treat my people? And if you go back to the Bible, Jesus, what's the most important commandment? Love your God above all other gods. And what's the second? Just like it.
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what that question was about. It was, how do we treat each other? How do we care about each other? How do we love each other? And I think, like I said, I'm probably coming to the end of my life. And I've been asked, how do you want to be remembered? I don't want to be remembered. I'm not going to be remembered. 100 years from now, nobody's going to even remember I was here. But what I want while I'm here is I want to connect. I want to connect with people. And I think if COVID taught us anything, it's how much better we are together than we are separately. During COVID, alcoholism rates went up, drug abuse rates went up, domestic violence rates went up, divorce rates went up. We're not good by ourselves. We need to be together. And I think that book really reinforced that with me about the importance of connection with other people.
Sorry, what was the title of that book again, please, Joe?
Imagine Heaven.
Imagine Heaven. Okay.
Actually,
Well, for our listeners, we'll put a link in the description for you on that. Great.
yes, you may be interested in an interview that we did quite recently, actually. I don't think it's been published yet, Peter. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was somebody who studied near-death experiences for 25 to 30 years. And that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Douglas Mulhall, and that episode has been published. We did a follow-up one with him on epigenetics, which is still to come in a couple of weeks' time. But
no, I think this was someone else, Peter.
Oh, not
Yes.
Douglas. So he was longevity. You were talking about DJ Kadagian. Yes, a filmmaker and author. Sorry, I apologize. And he's also
That's okay.
He's a documentary filmmaker as well.
That's right.
Yes.
You're right. That
Kadagian is his name.
Kadagian. That's coming up in.
I will check that out when it comes out. I'd love to listen to that.
Yes.
He's really good. About 2 or 3 weeks time that'll be coming out. Wow, very good.
We touched on your book, and again at the title. Would you happen to have a copy to show the viewers, to people that are there? There it is.
No,
there
I
it is.
One.
Again, it's called Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. Terry, is there anything else that you'd like people to know about your book?
The book it's broken down into each chapter is a principle. And I don't think any of the principles, it's not in any order. Number 1 isn't anything any more important than number 7. But they're just things that, like, I'll give you the one that resonates with me the most, even though I wrote all 10 of them. And I'll be honest with you, it resonates with me because I've done this, and I'm not necessarily proud that I've done this in my life. And I can't remember, it's the second or third chapter. It's titled "Most People Think with Their Fears and Their Insecurities instead of using their minds." And I know I've done that in my life. I know I've wanted to start this, but oh, wait a minute. I don't know, maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe I don't have enough information, or what will people say about me if I fail? And whenever I talk to especially young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back
Too
and
late.
do them.
No, you're absolutely right.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. And just on top of that, and I'm sure you'll agree, most of the things we fear are worse in the expectation than they are in the reality when we eventually go through them.
Sure,
I've had
oftentimes.
I've had a few bad. I lived in Africa most of my life, but this episode not about me. But I found the things that I was really scared about, and they were serious. They were serious. When they happened, they weren't as bad. I got through it. I didn't die, and I survived, right? And I'm still here 20 years later. So, and talking to a lot of other people, the same thing. That the fear, the expectation is often far worse than the reality. So that
Oh,
helps me.
absolutely. Yeah.
Always helps me to remember that. Yeah, very good. So here's one for you from your area of expertise. A lot of people who are listening to this, and a lot of people we hope will listen to this in the future, are really concerned about their lives, their purpose, and the somewhat troubled times we seem to be heading into. With the Ukraine, Middle East, inflation, all sorts of things. What's one little nugget of wisdom you would pass on to people listening to this that they can start doing tomorrow or today to just make their life a little bit better and a little happier as they go ahead?
I think it would be, Peter, sort of taking that to, we're just screaming at each other,
Hmm.
and when I'm screaming at you and you're screaming at me, neither one of us can understand what the other person is saying. And I think it's important. I'll go back to what I said as a negotiator, the empathy part,
Yep,
help me to understand where you're coming from. Like I said, I may not agree with you, but somehow we've gotten off the rails where, if you don't agree with everything that I believe, that you're a bad person. When did that happen?
that's
You're
right.
not a bad person just because we don't agree on one political thing or social thing or something like that. I would say try to understand people more.
Hmm.
Try to,
Hmm.
not judge based on, what CNN tells you or Fox tells you or the media tells you. Make up your own mind. Make up your own
Yep.
mind with that individual. Ask that person. And yeah, I mean, obviously, I can talk your ear off, but I'm also really good at listening. I'm really good at understanding what you're saying and what you're not saying. And I'm good at asking that follow up question that makes you vulnerable. And if you're
Right.
willing to be vulnerable with me, then I'm willing to be vulnerable with you. And now all of a sudden, we've got a relationship. And I'll go back to the Imagine Heaven book. Now we've got a connection as well.
Hmm. Hmm. No, absolutely. Very good advice. Thank you for that. Thank
Oh
you for
my
that.
goodness. So we are almost out of time, Terry, but how do people contact you?
Sure. So I have a website/blog called Motivational Check. And every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought usually comes a question about how maybe you could incorporate it in your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can get access to my social media links. You can leave me a message. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
And for our audio listeners, that link will be in the description. And I have to tell you, I have the website on my other big monitor right in front of me right now, and there's lots of really good stuff on there. Some very interesting blog posts. So, Terry, appreciate it. I've got one quick one, if Kathleen will permit me.
Sure.
We have a minute left.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
In your experience, do you believe that resilience is built incrementally? So if we go back to your sports days, if you can overcome a few knocks and defeats on in your basketball or football or whatever you're playing as a younger person, and then you survive a few business problems and getting fired, and then maybe there's a bit of violence thrown in somewhere along the line, you survive all that. Does all that build up your resilience? So when the really big one hits you, like your cancer or some of the things I went through, are you better placed?
I think you are, but I think it's something that you can and should do every day. And I recommend this, and I do it myself. I would never recommend something that I don't do myself. Every day of your life, do one thing that makes you nervous, that scares you, that is potentially embarrassing for you. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every single day, like you say, Peter, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us,
Everybody.
we lose
Yep.
somebody who's close to us, we get let go from our job, we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness, you will be so much more resilient to handle those things than those people who just kind of muddle through their life and never challenge themselves.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And to follow up to that, do you find with people you work with, if they have been involved in sports in their younger days and in competition, team sports, endurance sports, does that translate into the non-physical realm as well?
I think sports, I mean, one thing team sports taught me, and for me it was sports. I think it can be whatever team that you're on, and we're all on a team of some point, is the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Sure.
You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you for that, Terry. I know I've got to stop talking, but I have a quick message for our audience. We've had another wonderful guest on today. To make sure you don't miss some of the really good guests we've got coming up in the future, hop onto our website, theyakkingshow.com. Click on the purple button on the homepage and sign up for our newsletter. We only send you one email a week, and we tell you who's on this week and who's coming next week. That's it for me. Thanks again to Terry. Thanks to you for watching and listening, and back to Kathleen.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Terry, for being on our show today. You were such an inspiration, and absolutely would love to have you back on the show at some point. And thank you also very much again for tuning into our show. If anyone is interested in being a guest on the show, we invite you to visit us at theyakkingshow.com. All you need to do is click on the Contacts tab, where you will find a short application form, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.